All right, let's dive into something pretty fascinating. I think Nietzsche's take on solitude.
Okay.
It's like everyone's always telling us to connect and network and, be out there.
Right.
But this guy, one of history's most brilliant minds, he thought solitude was the key to, like, everything.
Yeah. That's pretty wild, right?
Well, it is fascinating, and I think it's probably more relevant now than ever.
You think so?
I do, yeah. We've got this excerpt from Nietzsche's work we're going to look at today,
Okay.
and it really shows how he saw solitude as not just like a retreat from the world,
Right.
but as a tool,
Like a tool.
a powerful tool for self-discovery,
Okay.
creativity,
All right.
and even rebellion.
Okay, so before we get too far,
Yeah,
I got to ask, because I think a lot of people, like myself included,
sure.
they hear solitude and they think, oh, that's lonely.
Right.
But Nietzsche meant something different.
Exactly. That's one of the most important things to understand about what he's saying.
He's not talking about being isolated or withdrawing completely from society.
Mm-hmm.
It's about making a deliberate choice to step away from the influence of the herd.
The herd.
That's what he called it.
Okay.
The herd, that constant pressure to conform,
Yeah.
think and behave like everyone else.
Oh, okay.
Solitude for Nietzsche was about connecting with your inner world,
Okay.
your own thoughts and values.
And I think a lot of us, especially now with social media and everything,
Right.
you get swept up in what everybody else is doing or thinking.
It's true.
Yeah, it's like we've forgotten how to think for ourselves.
It's almost like we've outsourced our thinking to algorithms.
To algorithms, yeah.
It's scary, huh?
Yeah, a little bit. So, I mean, was Nietzsche onto something here?
I think so.
Okay.
He recognized the dangers of what he called herd instinct.
Herd instinct.
Yeah, this tendency to just blindly follow the crowd.
Even if it means,
Yeah,
giving up what makes you you.
exactly. Even if it means sacrificing your individuality.
So how did he think we could break free from that?
Well, he believed that solitude was the antidote,
The antidote.
the way to break free from conformity.
But how does that work?
Well, he thought when you're constantly surrounded by noise and distractions, it's hard to hear your own voice.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It could be social media, could
Mhm.
just be the business of daily life.
Yeah, just everyday stuff.
It makes it really difficult to hear your own inner voice, and solitude creates that space for introspection.
Introspection.
Yeah, self-reflection,
Okay.
where you can confront your fears, your desires,
Limitations.
even your limitations, without the influence of external pressures.
So it's like looking in a mirror,
Yeah,
but without all the filters we see online.
precisely. And you know what's interesting is
Mm.
Nietzsche believed this process wasn't always comfortable.
Really?
Yeah, he talked about solitude as a path to self-discovery, but he knew that sometimes what you discover about yourself in those quiet moments
Yeah.
can be kind of unsettling.
Oh, wow. It's about facing those uncomfortable truths about yourself, the things you might try to hide
From the world.
from the world. Exactly.
And then what?
Well, and then integrating them
Okay.
to a more whole and authentic sense of self.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes me think about all the times I felt like I had to agree with a popular opinion,
Right?
even if I didn't really believe it.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't want to rock the boat or stand out or...
It takes courage to resist that.
It does.
And that's where Nietzsche saw solitude as an act of rebellion.
Rebellion.
Yeah, a refusal to conform to what the herd is doing.
Uh-huh. Oh,
And it's not just about resisting social pressures. It's also about questioning those inherited beliefs.
inherited beliefs.
Yeah, the values you absorb from your family, your culture,
Right.
without ever really asking if they're true for you.
So taking a step back
Exactly.
and really thinking about those things.
Yeah, solitude gives you the mental space to do that.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty profound.
Because it's not just about, growing as a person.
Right.
It's about deciding what you believe in.
Exactly.
And then that has an impact on how you make decisions.
It does.
How you relate to other people.
It affects everything.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating your inner compass, a sense of direction that comes from knowing who you are.
And what you stand for.
Exactly, independent of what anyone else thinks.
And that can be pretty powerful.
It can. It's incredibly empowering.
But doesn't that take a lot of self-awareness?
It does.
Is that something solitude can actually help you develop?
That's a great question, and I think it does.
Okay.
Remember, Nietzsche wasn't talking about just isolating yourself.
Yeah.
It's about actively engaging with yourself, trying to understand what motivates you,
Yeah.
your fears, your aspirations.
And that can be tough, right?
It can. It's not always easy.
Yeah.
But he believed that this process of examining yourself, even confronting the parts of yourself that you might not like,
Yeah.
was crucial for developing a better understanding of who you are.
You know, this reminds me of all those, like, great thinkers and artists who talk about how important solitude is
Oh, yeah.
for their creative process.
Absolutely.
Like, they needed that time alone to really tap into something deeper.
It's something more authentic.
So Nietzsche was onto something.
He was very interested in what he called the great souls.
It's that.
The artists, the philosophers, the visionaries, the people who think differently.
Folks who changed the world.
Exactly. And he believed that solitude played a big role in their ability to create great work.
That's pretty powerful.
It is.
Yeah.
And, you know, in the source material you provided, he really emphasized the relationship between solitude and creativity.
I remember that, yeah.
He said it wasn't just helpful, it was practically essential for anyone who wanted to create something truly original.
Really? Like, you had to have it.
Pretty much.
Okay.
He saw the creative process as something that needed distance from the herd, from those conventional ways of thinking.
Okay.
And in order to tap into originality, that spark of genius
That everyone has.
he believed we need to create space where those ideas can flourish.
Without being judged.
Without judgment, without expectation.
Okay, I'm getting it now.
Yeah.
So solitude is like the fertile ground for creativity.
Exactly. It's about stepping away from the noise so you can hear that creative impulse more clearly.
Okay.
And for Nietzsche, this wasn't just about art or philosophy. It was about living a more meaningful life.
In general.
In general, yeah.
But how do you actually do that?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to talk about it.
Right. But how do you put it into practice?
And that's something we're going to explore further in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, but we'll be back shortly with more on the fascinating world of Nietzsche and solitude.
And we're back digging deeper into Nietzsche and solitude.
You know, we were talking about how people throughout history have used solitude to tap into something deeper, to find their purpose.
Right.
But it makes me wonder
Yeah.
how much solitude is enough.
How much is too much, you mean?
Yeah, like, is there a point where it becomes a bad thing?
That's a great question. And, you know, Nietzsche actually addresses this in his work.
Really?
He knew there was a danger in becoming too isolated, too detached.
From the world.
Yeah,
So it's like anything else, you need a balance.
exactly.
You don't want to go too far in either direction.
It's about finding that sweet spot between the inner work of solitude
Okay.
and the engagement with the world that gives it meaning.
And that balance is going to be different for everyone.
Right. Some people need more time alone than others.
It's about figuring out what works for you.
Exactly.
I think it's interesting how we often associate solitude with negative things.
Like what?
Like loneliness or being a recluse.
Right. Like it's a sign that something's wrong.
Yeah. But Nietzsche seems to be saying that it can actually be a source of strength.
Absolutely.
Really?
He saw it as a way to cultivate what he called inner strength.
Inner strength. Okay.
The ability to withstand pressure, to think for yourself.
To not be swayed by what other people think.
Exactly. To make decisions based on your own values.
That's pretty powerful stuff.
It is.
Especially in today's world,
Especially today.
where it feels like everyone's trying to tell you what to think.
Right. It's like we're constantly bombarded with information.
And opinions.
Opinions, yeah.
It's overwhelming.
It can be, and I think that's why solitude feels even more important now.
Could get away from all that.
Yeah, to create some space for yourself, to reconnect with what truly matters.
I mean, we talk about self-care all the time,
All the time.
but it seems like the focus is always on external things.
Like what?
Like, I don't know, bubble baths, face masks, that kind of stuff.
Right, treating yourself.
But maybe real self-care is about cultivating that inner space.
That sense of peace and stillness that solitude can bring.
You know, that makes a lot of sense.
I think so.
We've been talking about the benefits for individuals,
Right.
but I'm curious about the bigger picture.
Like how solitude affects society as a whole.
Yeah, is there a connection there?
I think Nietzsche would say there is.
Okay.
He believed that when individuals develop self-reliance, independent thinking, inner strength.
Those qualities can have an impact on the world around them.
Exactly.
So if more people embraced solitude,
We could potentially see a more innovative, creative, compassionate society.
it's like a ripple effect.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think we're already seeing signs of that shift happening.
How so?
Well, there's a growing interest in mindfulness,
Yeah.
meditation, practices that help us connect with that inner stillness.
Right, but you're saying those aren't the same as solitude.
They can be helpful.
Okay.
But they're not a replacement for true solitude, for that time spent alone with your own thoughts.
So as we're wrapping up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
what's the one thing you want listeners to remember about solitude?
That it's not a luxury, it's a necessity,
Not an escape from the world,
but a way to enrich it.
with the insights and wisdom we gain from being alone.
Exactly, and remember, even small moments of solitude can make a difference.
So we don't have to go live in a cave for a year.
Not at all. It could be a few minutes of meditation each day.
Or a walk in the park by yourself.
Or even just turning off your phone for an hour.
To unplug and disconnect.
To give your brain a break.
It's about creating that space for yourself however you can.
And trusting that in those moments of quiet, you'll find the clarity and inspiration you need.
I love that.
To live a more fulfilling life.
This has been such a great conversation.
It has.
I'm already looking at solitude in a whole new way.
I'm glad to hear that.
But it looks like we're running out of time for this part of our deep dive,
But don't go anywhere. We'll be back soon for our final segment.
where we'll talk about some practical tips for incorporating solitude into your daily life.
And discuss how even small moments of solitude can have a big impact.
Stay tuned.
And we are back, wrapping up our deep dive into Nietzsche's views on solitude.
You know, this has been a fascinating conversation.
It has.
I'm already starting to see those little moments of solitude throughout the day, like, differently.
How so?
Like, they have more potential than I thought.
I know what you mean. It's amazing how just a shift in perspective
Yeah.
can change how we experience things.
You know, speaking of perspective,
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to something you said earlier
Yeah.
about solitude being a form of resistance.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk about that a little more?
Well, I think it's about resisting this constant flood of information and stimulation that's everywhere.
Yeah, like from the moment you wake up,
It never stops.
your phone's buzzing, there's news, emails, social media. It's too much.
It can be really overwhelming.
And it's not just about feeling overwhelmed. It's
Mhm.
like we're being trained to let other things control our attention.
To outsource our thinking,
Yeah, exactly.
even our emotions.
Like we're just absorbing whatever we see online instead of forming our own opinions.
Exactly. And I think that's where solitude comes in.
To give us that space to think for ourselves again.
Exactly. To reclaim our mental space, our ability to think critically and independently.
You know, it makes me think about how we talk about self-care these days.
All the time.
But it's always about external things.
Right?
Like bubble baths or getting a massage.
Pampering yourself.
Yeah, but maybe real self-care starts with cultivating that inner peace.
That sense of stillness that solitude can provide.
So it's not just about taking care of your body.
Right. It's about nurturing your mind and your emotional well-being.
We've talked a lot about the benefits for individuals.
Right.
But what about the bigger picture, like for society as a whole?
That's a great question.
Do you think embracing solitude can have an impact on society?
I think Nietzsche would say absolutely yes.
How so?
Well, when people develop self-reliance, independent thinking, inner strength, those qualities ripple outward.
Okay.
They influence the world around them.
So if more people were willing to step back from the crowd,
Think for themselves.
question the status quo,
It could lead to a more innovative, creative, maybe even a more compassionate society.
it's like a cultural shift
I think it is, yeah?
where solitude is seen as a strength,
Not something to be avoided.
a source of wisdom and progress.
I think that shift is already starting to happen.
Really?
Look at the growing interest in mindfulness,
Yeah, that's true.
meditation, anything that helps us connect with that inner stillness.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Nietzsche's world,
Yeah.
what's the main takeaway you hope listeners will remember?
That solitude isn't a luxury, it's a necessity.
Not an escape from the world.
But a way to make it better.
By bringing back the insights and wisdom we gain from being alone.
Exactly. And remember, even small moments of solitude can make a big difference.
A few minutes of meditation,
A walk in the park by yourself.
turning off your phone for a little while.
Just being present with your own thoughts and feelings.
It's about creating that space for yourself however you can.
And trusting that in those quiet moments, you'll find the clarity and inspiration you need.
To live a more fulfilling life.
Exactly.
This has been an amazing conversation.
I agree. It's been great.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of solitude.
I'm glad to hear that.
And I hope our listeners do too.
Me too.
Well, that's it for this episode of The Deep Dive.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Be sure to tune in next time for another deep dive into fascinating ideas that matter.